So, hello everybody, and welcome along to another of the podcasts with me, Ben Calder from Integral Health. And today, I'm really pleased to be able to introduce to you Dr. Nelli Gluzman, who's the founder of Blossom Pediatrics in New York. And Dr. Gluzman is a holistic pediatrician dedicated to helping your child to heal and utilizing personalized approaches to integrative and functional medicine, allowing your child to live an illness-free life. So, Nelli, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's so exciting to be on. I'm such a huge fan of your show. So talking to you today is extra special morning.
Thank you so much. And honestly, as well, looking at your work, it's a real honor to have you here talking to me today. It's some really impressive stuff that you're doing. And, you're incredible. You're a board certified pediatrician and you've got, all sorts of credentials around being a pediatrician, different levels of work. And you're also a holistic and integrative medicine specialist. You're into functional medicine. You're the only certified GAPS, which is a gut and psychological syndrome practitioner in New York. So, incredible. Tell me a little bit about why it is you like working in this field. What is it that kind of attracts you into this?
Well, when you ask that question, what I really think about is what attracts me to more of a holistic way of practicing, which is not so common. And I think probably a lot of guests that came on your show that I've heard, and a lot of people that deviate from the more conventional path, they do so because they had to. Mm-hmm. It's not because it's the easier way to do it. It's definitely not as a well-paved of a road as conventional medicine. And this happened because my own daughter was pretty sick, way too much. And when she would just miss, she was about 4 years old. She would miss so much school, being sick over and over again. She was on like 7 courses of antibiotics in 1 year. One time she asked me as like a 4-year-old, "Mom, why do I keep getting sick?" And at that point I realized, even as a pediatrician, I had no idea what to tell her, because although I knew the science and the practice of getting really sick, hospitalized kids well and going home, life-saving medicine, working in a hospital setting and specializing in that, a more conventional route, I had no idea how to actually keep her healthy. And this was a whole different world. And so when I figured it out for my own family and even for myself, I knew that I had to do the same for others. So that's where I kind of deviated from the conventional path and became a holistic provider.
And how do you find that's been received by your colleagues in pediatric medicine as well?
It's not that simple, and it really depends on how you present it. So a lot of the specialists that I speak to, when I ask them, like, for example, when I ask allergists who do life-saving work, and I respect it so much, and I feel like, conventional pharmaceuticals for allergies, to prevent anaphylaxis, medications that are like steroids that stop inflammation, they're all life-saving treatments. And it's so important to know, what your child is allergic to avoid it. But when I ask them, like, well, what can you do to reverse it? There are no answers. It's either your child will outgrow it, or it's just genetics, or, as if like epigenetics doesn't really apply to that field, or detox, or there's no other treatments that are available in that field besides the conventional band-aids that are used to, yes, get rid of symptoms, but what are we doing at the same time to look at the root cause of the symptom and reverse that? So a lot of times it's kind of like, it doesn't say it, there's not enough evidence behind it. And so there is no root cause approach to it, which I understand, because thankfully we want our practitioners practicing best practice guidelines and looking at all the evidence behind a recommendation. But it's kind of, there are not as many studies that show, why looking at gut health will help decrease inflammation. It's not as easy to study. There's not that much money behind it, but we all know it works. I mean, if any of you have tried it, you know that you are going to be healthier if you if you fix a big problem with dysbiosis, for example. And so it's not always simple, and it really depends on how you present it. I try to kind of be an ally and work together instead of saying like, this is the only solution and your solution is wrong. In fact, in my practice in New York, Blossom Pediatrics, I make sure that all my patients are coming in with their list of specialists, and I call them all going, this is what we're going to do together. And that works well. I also teach medical students and residents, and I love to see their eyes light up when I teach them and explain to them through basically, I interrogate them like, well, why does this happen? Why? Well, let's look at asthma. Well, why is there asthma? And they'll give me like the textbook answer, but why does that happen? And then there's just like a blank, as if nothing before it exists. And so I love to see their eyes light up when I teach them, or I help them discover their own questions to ask when they're practicing their own medicine. They're a lot more receptive. They haven't been in the field as long. And I'm loving how a lot of attention is being given to wellness. There's so much information out there now on, for example, the mind-body connection. And this is relatively new. So it's emerging. It's not as common in pediatrics, but we're getting there.
Yeah. And I certainly found the same, within the UK myself, that a lot of medical practitioners here in the UK, that they're training to even look at nutrition as a basic module. It is a matter of days within their 7-year training. So they have very little understanding of kind of the mechanics of how that would make a difference. And having kind of spoken myself to post-grads just as they're kind of coming into their fields, and talk to them about the difference between that kind of symptomatic relief, that triage approach, and actually looking in causatively, and there's times where it blows their minds. It really kind of, that they never really thought about, or how did we get from there to there? And it seems that basic understanding of, well, everything in the body's happening because of factors that are enacting on the body. So if we take, for instance, diet and look at that, how can we not think that has a contribution to the outcome of the body? It's like putting cheap parts in a car and then wondering why it's not running so well after 5 years, 10 years.
Oh, I love that. I love that. What you said, it's like putting cheap. I'm going to borrow that next time I explain things to my patients. I love that. Thank you.
You can steal it. I mean, I use a full analogy with my own clients where we talk about that if you were an obscenely expensive car, like a one-of-a-kind, really bespoke vehicle, then you would make sure that you serviced the car regularly. You would make sure that you put quality parts, you would put quality fuel in, and you would become a better driver. So now if we see you as that, obscenely expensive car, are you servicing regularly? Are you using the best parts? Are you putting the best fuel in? And are you a good driver? And then that way we get this kind of objective and subjective sides of how we're caring for ourselves. And it's an analogy that I find makes a lot of easy sense for people to be able to grab onto and really okay, well, this is why I'm going to look after it.
Yeah, it's also a lot easier to see it with kids because they haven't had as much of a life and there's not as much damage to reverse. And I love that. So I'm a pediatrician and I only treat kids or anyone under 18. But usually when I put kids on protocols, the whole family does it to be in line with the child. And then the whole family is like so happy, looking great, feeling amazing and better than ever. And everything that's safe for kids is safe for adults. That's also amazing. But we don't have as many tools for kids as we do for adults, but we don't need them because nature has all the tools. It really does.
And do you find that having that cultural buy-in from the family where they're doing the same protocols as the children, and so there's that real sense of being supported, being included, this is something that we endorse as a family. Do you find that is a really important component in the outcome that you get with the children?
Yes. So a lot of times parents and other providers ask me, like, is it really hard with kids because they're kids? No, it's all the family doing the cooking, right? They're children. And usually I would say the most common age that parents bring me their child is like under 5, they're not making their own meals, and they're not really responsible for what they're eating. It's not like they're teenagers and they go outside and they get to pick whatever they want. There are not as many influences. And so the culture buy-in is because it takes time to prepare all the foods, whether they want to or not. They end up doing a lot of the protocol themselves. And so it's easier when kids are younger. And I found also that when I work with teenagers, they're at that point when they're looking outside of conventional medicine, that they want to feel better. And even on the most kind of like restrictive protocols for really severe cases, even teenagers don't want to go back to the way they were because they feel so much better. And I thought it was going to be such a big challenge always, but it really isn't, because when a body knows what they're getting is healing them, it really does translate to action.
Absolutely. I mean, I was speaking with a new client yesterday, a 13-year-old lad who is suffering really interesting inflammation pain throughout his diaphragm, throughout his chest. And when you look at his diet, it's kind of like, no wonder that, and posture and the way that he isn't really doing a lot of movement. It's kind of like, it's really easy to identify why some of that might be taking place. And he's been with his own GP, his own specialist here, and they don't really have anywhere to go with him other than the hope that he will grow out of it or it'll change. So having a conversation with him yesterday and saying, look, these are things that we understand about why your body might have more inflammation and why that pain might be. Do you want to change that? And of course he wants to change it because it's affecting the way he lives. And so it's much easier to get the buy-in, but then having to have a separate conversation with the mother and say, okay, the way you approach this needs to be as a whole family and a support, not separating that up. And it's amazing how so often the children are ready to make those changes, and they can be the ones that are kind of encouraging the parents to do things, and even schooling the parents and saying, look, mom, don't, remember this, don't forget about this, change this for me. Why are we having this? I can't have this. It's always good to see.
So true. Even when there's one little caveat to that. Right now it's like holiday time, and I also work with a lot of families who have different kinds of cultural traditions, and those things are really important to the family. I kind of let them do. I decided to let the family gatherings that are not every day and every single meal, but the things that, like cookies for Santa. I just had this with my in my program. Like, well, what do we do? Christmas is coming, and it's a tradition, and they're looking forward to them. Like, well, make them as healthy as you can. Obviously, don't but also if it's bringing you joy in a way that is bringing the family together, it is allowed. And the same thing applies for I work with a lot of families in New York who celebrate Sabbath, and they have it's certain kinds of things, not in a large amount, but that it's done every weekend, and that means a lot to the family. And I feel like the mind body soul connection when it comes to that is just so important, and that outweighs like the risk if that's part of the culture and family's traditions.
And I love that, because that really does highlight the nature of integrative medicine. It's about that balance and about that harmony between all of these aspects that are taking place. And rather than make it something that is exclusive or is in some way ostracizing, especially some of those cultural traditions, it's finding a way to find that balance, balancing it up against the good stuff and doing what you can to make it healthy, so that nothing is essentially off the table. It's just about when and how it's on the table.
Bringing mindfulness and a heart into it. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, beautiful. So today I really want to talk to you, or rather have you talk to me about the protocol that you've been promoting that's on your website. And we're going to have a link to that in the podcast and in the video below, which is about achieving peak health for your family this fall, which is autumn for us UKers, in that nutrition immunity program that you've got there. So tell me about that.
So it started off as me needing to make sure that I don't get sick, because I do work in a high risk environment, and I needed to, every year I sit down and I look at the most up to date evidence behind what's going on, what's working. There's so much, some of it is traditional wisdom, and it's always good, and other recommendations. And I don't recommend supplements, barely, but I try to weed out, what new information is out there every single year for myself, for my family, so I don't get sick. And I love looking at studies too, and there's just so many. And so I created this kind of protocol for myself, for my child, and for my patients, because at that time when I started to write it, we were really hit hard with COVID in New York, and like, I really didn't want to get sick, to be honest. And so this is where this year's protocol came from. It has a lot of, it's all based on gut healing, really, and giving the body the building blocks it needs to heal, with the obvious traditional approach to medicine. All the recommendations that I make, both as a holistic pediatrician and as a conventional pediatrician, they have to follow really strict criteria when I make my recommendations. So I recommend you do the same at home. Like, really look at your research, really look at a more holistic approach before you look at a sales aspect of it. So I just have like 5 criteria, and I think you could apply it to any decision that you make as a consumer, as a parent, and as a human that wants to optimize their health and build health and build resilience. And this is especially good for kids. So the first criteria is, does the solution cover up symptoms? Is it a Band-Aid solution, or does it help you treat the root cause of what you're trying to treat? So I think that's also the main difference between what holistic medicine is and what conventional medicine is. And I think this is fundamental to true health. So all of you listeners who might have either a child who has like asthma, eczema, allergies, which is really common right now, and that's why I keep bringing them up, or maybe digestive issues, or yourself might be plagued with any inflammatory problem. When you're looking at solutions, does the medication or the approach that you decide to take, does it cover up symptoms, or does it look at the root cause as well? Both are really important for health. You can't do one without the other, really. I mean, at the very least, you can't look at covering up symptoms with medications like anti-inflammatory medications for your arthritis, or antacids, or H2 blockers, or PPIs, which are heartburn medications for your heartburn, without at the same time looking at what is the cause of it. And sometimes it's really simple. Sometimes it just takes like one little tweak in your daily life. And that approach is the holistic approach. So do both. My second criteria is, does your solution support the body's natural healing process? Does it allow the body to heal itself? Because let me tell you, I am pretty sure that nature knows a lot more about healing than we do, and we're just at the tail end of it. And I really, as long as it supports nature, as long as it gives the body the building blocks it needs to heal and be healthy, it's good. The third criteria is, ask yourself, does it cause any harm? So if there's any chemicals or preservatives in it, I would definitely stay away from it. It's not worth it. The fourth criteria is it made mindfully, which is something that is very often forgotten, but we do need to remember that the foods that we eat, or whatever solution that we choose, there are so many hands that touched it, from the farmer to the soil to the impact on the environment. When you're giving it that mindful approach of how, does it ruin the environment or does it help the environment? I think it also makes that solution extra powerful. And the fifth criteria is it evidence-based, which is what I'm a total geek on. Is it subject to some kind of double-blind, placebo-controlled, high-quality study that back all the ingredients? And so those are the 5 recommendations that I applied to all my solutions and protocols, and I suggest you do the same. Yeah. So
And that's so beautiful as well. I mean, I just love the fact that you're picking up, for me, you know, as an integral practitioner, as somebody that looks in the world from that body, mind, relationships, environment point of view, you know, this is exactly the way that I like to work as well. You know, you've got to make sure that you're not just covering up. You know, I often talk about it as the noise. You know, so I'll often see a lot of skin issues coming into my clinic, and you know, typically people are using hydrocortisone creams that they've been given by the doctors, and I always talk about it like it's a volume control. All it's doing is shutting off the noise. It's not stopping the machine from playing the music. So you know, that process is still taking place on underneath, even if you can't see it. So making sure that you're not just covering things over, but really getting into the root is so important. But then to not do any harm, to think about where all of these things are sourcing from. And it's amazing how many people don't understand the difference between, you know, buying something that's come from a good environment, something that's organic, something that's pesticide free, and then whatever the kind of the cheap value produce is down at their local supermarket, and can't understand the variance between those two things. But they make such a fundamental difference because of what's included and what's excluded within that process.
I love that metaphor. It's a volume control. Oh gosh, yes, it's so true. And you mentioned mindfulness, and let's talk about that, because that's actually my first. That's my first go-to. It's been my first go-to this year, last year. It's how do we achieve peak health? We have to start with connecting the mind, the heart, and the immune system. If we're talking about immunity. There are so many ways to affect the immune system, both in a positive way and a negative way. And thankfully, there's also tremendous knowledge and evidence-based information around now, as opposed to like even 5 years ago, on which foods and medicines and herbs and homeopathic formulations that can boost the immune system. But what about mindset? Only recently, conventional medical communities started to focus on mindset, and how that affects immunity. And that's great, because a lot of us already knew that, but now there's a big push towards that. So how that works is affect and emotion are essentially two essential parts of the process of an organism's interaction with any stimuli. So similar to that, the immune response is a tool the body uses to interact with the external environment. We all know that. But now we have a large body of both clinical and experimental evidence that shows how the emotional and immunological systems literally mirror each other in a very dynamic and symbiotic relationship. And they're always changing and they're always adjusting. And so we can't really look at immunity and achieving peak health physically without looking at mindset. And that is a really broad term. It could mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people, and none of them are wrong, actually. You know, there's not one meditation that's better than another, and there's not another one mindfulness practice that's better than another, and it could be super simple. This is one of the components of the program that I'm running with my patients, when they're trying to reverse some serious chronic medical conditions. And we incorporate this into every single aspect of healing. And for children, that doesn't necessarily mean sitting down and, you know, doing a 25-minute meditation. Even something like coloring, journaling, gratitude, visualization, something that could be adopted for any age is considered mindfulness, in my opinion. And so there are so many tools that could so powerfully and positively improve the immune system function. I personally have my yoga changed my life completely. I cannot live without it. It makes me healthy inside and out. And but it doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be strict practice. It could be art, song, dance. I'm like loving journaling every morning right now during the stream of consciousness, and those things can change. And so even for our youngest, we could use this as a very powerful tool for boosting a child's immune system and superpowering their health.
And again, I love the fact that you're creating that differentiation between different types of mindful activity. I've had so many clients over the years that will talk about, I've tried meditation and I can't do it. And I said, well, describe to me what it is you're doing. And they're always talking about trying to sit silently and switching off the mind. And it's kind of like, okay, so that's one description of that, but there are so many other ways of looking at it. You know, it's about having something that you can focus into, and it's in a way that is not creating any stress or anxiety. So there's no pressure, there's no demand, there's no judgment, there's no time limits in there. We're just into that process. So exactly like you say, art, dance, movement, there are so many different ways of engaging that then put us into that beautiful parasympathetic state. You know, we're really encouraging that relax, restore, repair state within the body, rather than being in that kind of fight flight end, that sympathetic state where we're much more likely to kind of have the immune system being repressed, have the digestion being repressed, and just being in a space that isn't really conducive for anything long term. They're okay, you know, if there's a lion running down the street, perfect. But, and again, in the way that modern life is constantly kind of triggering us and tripping us into these kind of states of tension, but not really having an adequate map within our world to be able to relax, to be able to be peaceful. I mean, even a lot of our TV is very stimulatory in its nature. It's dramatic, it's creating tensions, and that for me is all kind of counter to good health and good well-being, really.
Well, actually, yes, let's talk about that. TV and screens in general and media. And that actually brings me into my second recommendation, which is detox. And so we really work, I mean, our bodies have a natural ability to be able to detox themselves. And sometimes we want to help the body out. And one way to do this is to basically increasing our antioxidants. This is like the most natural way. I have been a huge fan of juicing. Recently, I saw how much of an impact it's had on my life. It's part of the protocols that I use for my patients. It makes a big difference. It doesn't have to be a whole big deal. Even a few times a week really does help, but it has to be done in a certain way, because we know we can't eat a pound of carrots all at once, and but we do need the nutrients that we could consume, especially if you're doing like a healing protocol. And this is especially good for kids who had not such great, like if you're, kids who are like a bit pale or been sick recently, or not outside that much, you really want to like do like a big boost of nutrients and antioxidants. Juicing is the way to go, but it has to be done in a certain way. It can't just be something that you buy in a store unless you really know what you're getting. So there's a big difference between juicing when it's processed in a really high blend environment and it's heated and all the enzymes die, versus something slow rotating like mastication juicing, which is what I have back here is like my mastication juicer, and I love it. And it has to be done on an empty stomach, so you could really absorb all the nutrients. And what that means for families is like first thing in the morning is great, or on an empty stomach, which is about 20, maybe 25 minutes before food, or maybe 2.5 hours after you eat. And so you don't want to just do the fruits. My rule with kids is like 50% tasty and 50% less tasty. And if you can guess, the tasty is the fruit and the less tasty is the veggies and the greens. And for little kids who are not used to it, I would say mix it with water and start really slow. And even a few tablespoons does make a big difference. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are other ways to help the liver, for example, help the liver detox. So, of course, I'm always going to turn to foods first. There's something called glutathione reductase, which is what the liver uses to mop up all the free radicals and helps us detox. And when it comes to the immune system, it's especially important now when we need as many natural killer cells as possible as our first line of defense. Especially like if you've been on any kind of medications recently or taking any medications, the liver has to process that. And we want to bring glutathione into our systems. So we make it, but we could also eat it in the form of cruciferous veggies. And those are like kale, bok choy, Swiss chard, arugula, broccoli, cauliflower, all the things that are most beloved in this world. Yeah. And there's also a supplement, but I think that's like third line. You can use it. I do use it sometimes, but you really want to turn to what nature gives us first to boost our glutathione. Now, back to screens. We also have to detox from screens and blue light. And there's more and more evidence showing how blue light affects so many parts of our bodies, especially when it comes to melatonin production. And that is a huge factor when it comes to sleep. So melatonin is a hormone. It's a beautiful, important chemical messenger that allows us to fall asleep. And how it works in the body is when you go outside and you look at sunlight, natural sunlight, or blue light that comes from a screen or LED lights, melatonin stops being produced and you're awake. When you turn off all the stimulation from blue light, which is naturally found in sun or screens or LED lights, it allows melatonin to be released and you could fall asleep. A lot of people are so used to watching TVs and screens and having bright lights on close to bed that they're not realizing that even though they might be falling asleep, the kinds of sleep rhythms, you don't go to the right as quickly into deep sleep, REM sleep, as you would normally. So it's really important to, give it as some time before bed. Try to follow the natural rhythm of nature, because it does make a huge difference. And I know it for myself because I wear this Oura ring right now that is actually showing me what impact blue light exposure has on my own life and sleep. And there are more and more studies that relate to that. And so I encourage you listeners to try it out for a week and see how you feel. Are you getting better sleep in the morning if you turn off the screens like an hour or two before bed? I want to even say 2 hours before bed.
Yeah.
Because I think that you'll find that when you wake up in the morning, and your kids will wake up in the morning, you will be a lot more well rested and your whole body will work better.
I really find that makes a significant difference. I mean, I'm sat here right now in a pair of blue light reducing glasses, so that, I might spend a few hours a day on the laptop and dealing with tech and so on. And I find it's made such a difference to have blue light filtering glasses on. And I'm a big advocate for, in the evenings, basically past 7 p.m. In our house, all the lights are basically turned down so that we go into kind of like much dimmer orangey light spectrums that would be much more kind of related to things like natural firelight, natural candlelight, and so on. So we already begin that process of sedating the body and letting it calm down actually quite early in the evening. And it just means that when my head hits the pillow, I'm out and that's it, and I'm gone, and I don't wake up until the next morning, and because my body's had that time to adjust down from that space. Whereas if we're on our phones last thing before we go to sleep, social media, a whole bunch of bits of information, that the mind is just becoming so activated by that even if it's not stopping us from sleeping, as you say, the quality of rest and the types of dreams that we can be stimulating at that point as well can be quite significantly affected.
And same for our kids. But I found that to be the hardest of all the recommendations to break or change. And so it's great if it's done with the whole family. There are ways to turn off Wi-Fi in the whole entire house through, like, I could basically turn off all the Wi-Fi in my house now through my own phone. And so it kind of, if you have teenagers, you have like full control. But I also found it to be a little bit shocking when you tell somebody like 2 hours and no screens, no TV, no news, no nothing, visually at least. And so a recommendation is only good as compliance. If you tell someone to do something and it's just not possible because it's such a dramatic change, then what's the point? And so I put families a lot of time, and myself, because I struggled with this so much through this, like 1 week, every day, do it even 5 minutes before bed, turn everything off. Or then the next day, if you like that, try 10 minutes, and so on and so forth, till you find your sweet spot.
And I also find as well that encouraging clients to add things in. So, when we get later into the evening, if we kind of keep in the theme of children, start doing something that isn't about being on the screen. So maybe a board game or, some artwork or something that changes the focus. Because I often find that when you're just in the process of taking things away, people feel that lack. And that space is what causes that tension and that contraction within them. But if you give them something first, it's easier to let the other thing drop away, because they don't feel so deprived. They're finding something that's kind of fulfilling in that space rather than feeling the loss of the tech.
I'm on a mission to bring board games back.
Yeah, sure.
National mission. I mean, board games, they're so much fun and there's so many of them, and I'm trying to bring it back in my own life, and that's something that a family could do together too.
Yeah. And just so much for that kind of interaction as well within the family, because I think we've got so much into this habit of, when everybody's home from work, kids are back from school, we've done dinner, everybody's sat in front of the TV. It's like the cinema, we're all facing the same way, we're all staring at the box, and we're not really interacting with each other except for odd comments about what it is we're watching. But those games really bring each other back together and allow for that kind of interaction to happen.
I call it the hole. It's the hole. Like, turn off the hole because you really get sucked in.
It really is. And I mean, I'm kind of excited as well that where we've made plans with my mum this year that she's going to be with us over Christmas. And we've kind of made this point, let's get games, let's do stuff where we can kind of hang out and have a laugh and play. And because we kind of don't do so much of the whole kind of presents and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like, what are we going to do to make this fun? So we're planning days out. We're planning, kind of what we're going to cook together. We're planning games so that we've got this whole alternate kind of process where we've got this time together. So it's about that interaction, about doing things together rather than just being there and it's the TV and that's all we're doing.
Yeah. Can I make a recommendation? A
Go for
fun
it.
family adult board game is Risk.
Yes. Do
Super
we
fun.
grew up playing that. I can remember being kind of maybe 5, 6 years old, and my brothers are 6 and 8 years older than me. And so, as a young man, it was kind of funny because essentially if they let me play Risk, they would quite quickly kind of like gang up on me
Oh, yeah.
to kind of move me out of the game because I just didn't get it at that kind of age. But yeah, that's there's lots of really great games that have all of that tactical thinking, because it really can develop a lot of brain processes and thinking techniques to involve these games. That's one of the real values, and I think something that we've lost so much on an educational point of view is different types of how to think rather than just what to think.
So true. Yeah. And then there's like things that you really don't need a lot of mind thinking about, but are super fun. And after like a long day, I definitely don't want to play any Risk, but I'll definitely play a round of Uno, and it always puts me in a good mood, and it always puts my 8-year-old in a great mood too.
Mm.
So even on like the worst, hardest day where just a lot happening, this is so that's why I'm on a mission to bring board games back. So pass the word down, please.
We will. We're going to do this with this podcast episode right now. Board games for good family interaction.
Yeah.
So one of the other things I really liked in this Peak Health Nutrition Immunity Program was that you kind of reference probiotic rich foods within there as well. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
I think this is like it's like the foundation of a house. You need to have a healthy gut for everything else to work, and that's why so many programs that you might see or protocols or approaches are gut based. One, because there's so much dysbiosis, because there are so many antibiotics in our environment, and we might have had rounds of it, and it kind of wipes out the gut. But also because fermented rich probiotic rich foods, essentially ferments, are not as popular these days. And so we might be knocking out a lot of our beneficial colonies of our guts out, disturbing the microbiome year after year, but we're not doing anything to bring it back. And so, so this is actually so foundational to all health, to detox, but also because about 88% of the immune system is matured and differentiated in the gut. This is where so much inflammation comes from. And that's why over and over again on podcasts and all over the place, we're talking about heal the gut, but how do you actually do that in a natural way? So one way to do that, and it's becoming more popular, is to look at probiotics. But I'm actually don't really use probiotics because I find them to be very variable. It's not the most natural. I'm not against them, but there's a better way. And that better way is not only cheaper, safer, so much more potent and more alive. But it works better, and it's foundational for a lot of protocols that I studied. One of them is the gut and psychology syndrome, and it's also traditional wisdom. This is what our ancestors did. They didn't know about microbes, but they knew that this is going to work, and it's been working so well. It's magical. So I mean, so again, this is the most potent, safe, effective, really the most holistic way to restore gut health is to eat a lot of probiotic rich foods, which mean fermented foods. And so there's kind of levels of that. My favorite starter ferment is sauerkraut. Mm-hmm. But you can't be like a sauerkraut that you go buy that's made with vinegar, that maybe was sitting on a shelf for a long time. I actually encourage you to consider making it yourself. And I love sauerkraut because all you need are two ingredients that are really easy to find. They're salt. It's just salt. A great salt is even better. Something with minerals would be wonderful. And a really great head of cabbage. And I love cabbage because it's very easy to find, affordably, local, which is so important for our environment. It's seasonal, so it's picked when it's most ripe and most nutritious, and it has a very long season. It's easy to find, super high quality. Is a head of cabbage, and all you have to do is shred it up, put salt on it, allow the water to seep out of it, mush it together, put it in a glass jar, put something heavy on top so nothing floats to the top, and put it in a dark space with some mesh covering it, and wait. And you can't really mess it up unless you don't pack it down. It's like the number one mistake is not packing it down with something really heavy. And when you're finished fermenting it, what you get is the most potent probiotic made from something natural. It's lactobacillus that is naturally found on a cabbage, and so it doesn't need to be made in a lab. You don't need to add anything to it. This is called wild fermentation, and it's the most potent probiotic that goes to the right place. And we need that right now, more than ever, where we are in society, in our Western world. We need these probiotic rich foods in our diet constantly. There are others.
And it's one of the things that I find really interesting looking at diets across the world, is that one of the healthiest diets in the world actually comes from the Koreans. And, they're one of the hardest working groups in the world when you look at their kind of statistics. But their traditional diet is basically fish, vegetables, and kimchi. So kimchi is another version of a kind of a fermented veggie. And it's one of those things that for me, when I look at that, I can immediately see, well, the kimchi is one of those big reasons why that health is there. And I think a lot of people also don't realize, they wonder why they might need to keep on doing this through their life. And I don't know how it is for you in the States, but for here in the UK, a lot of our fruit and vegetables in the supermarkets these days are actually washed in chlorine bleach. And people don't think about the fact that bleach is actually an antibiotic. It's there to kill bacteria. So even if we're having very low levels of bleach coming through in our food over long periods of time, it's gradually just sterilizing the gut and having that detrimental effect rather than having that kind of probiotic and that supportive effect.
And now more than ever, with all the use of cleaning products and antibacterials everywhere in all public places, just being sprayed down by it everywhere you go, and you're constantly sanitizing, we need to bring the probiotics back into our gut, the healthy, diverse microbiome. This will be the difference between health and disease. But you know what? If you don't like kimchi because it's spicy, that's fine. If you don't like sauerkraut because it's a little too tangy, that's fine, because you could actually ferment any fruit and vegetable. You could ferment. One favorite of kids is called beet kvass because it's super sweet and it's fermented beet juice, and it's super bright pink. So a lot of the younger kids like it. Fermented carrot sticks. You could ferment carrots, and they're finger foods, and they're great on the go. And I mean, not only is it good for your microbiome, but fermentation also releases a ton of vitamin C from foods. So a cabbage has like 20 times more vitamin C than it does before it's fermented. Mm. And we need that vitamin C as an antioxidant and also for our immunity. It's also easier to digest. Fermented foods are a lot easier to digest than their raw counterparts. And fermented foods are also a digestive enzyme. They help stimulate your digestive system to start to prepare to digest everything else. And so it's not just that they're healthy for your microbiome because they have so many beneficial microbes, but also because human beings really evolved to eat them. And it wasn't always that we had every single fruit and vegetable that you could possibly find in the planet in your supermarket. We needed to they're found in all traditional cultures in the world because of a need. And this is how human beings evolved, fermenting foods so that when it's not harvest time, we had foods to eat throughout the cold seasons.
And I think that's one of the things that's actually forgotten quite a lot is that, take us back 150 years before we had electricity. And, things were very, very different. So a lot of our modern health issues, and for me, I really start to kind of see that coming through from the 50s onwards when we had much more availability for refrigeration and so on. And we started to change our food production a lot. That's where we start to see a lot of these changes coming through from a health point of view. So we're relatively new into some of these health issues that are caused by the way that we're producing, storing, transporting, and preparing food these days.
Yeah, I mean, I use ferments as medicine, really. Just like you would get a prescription for your medication from your physician, I literally prescribe ferments to be eaten 3 times a day, in a certain way, rotating them in a certain way to restore gut health. And this does make the difference between having a child who has a chronic inflammation, maybe eczema or asthma or allergies, and needing to rely on a lot of band-aid solutions versus healing the gut. And then a lot of these allergies eventually start to dissolve.
Yeah. And again, I love the fact that this program that you've produced is so inclusive with that. One of the other elements I really liked that you've identified in there is mindset and the importance of that in having this healthy immune system. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, so when, sometimes all of these recommendations and changes, they could really stress a family out. And so you can't do that to yourself or to your family. It gets confusing too. I mean, as a parent, I can tell you that I'm a well-trained pediatrician and a parent, and I still get overwhelmed with the amount of information that is out there. And so it's really easy to get caught up. It's really easy to, as a parent or as for yourself, to start to feel guilty about the decisions you've made in the past. It's really easy you could really get sucked up in a hole of like looking backwards, or it's too much, or not knowing where to turn. And so keeping a positive mindset is so important. Remembering that the body has an ability to heal itself. Speaking about your feelings with each other. For kids, we sometimes don't include them in the conversations about how they're feeling. A lot of times when I work with families who've taken their kid to like hundreds of visits over the course of their lifetime, hospitalized multiple times, needing so many medications, and so illness becomes so central to their life. You won't believe, like, a lot of times the kids feel guilty about what's happening. And so having these open conversations about that, strengthening the body, your body has an ability to heal. It's not your fault. It's so important. And kids do see a lot of the stresses that we carry as parents, especially when it comes to health. And I'm kind of struggling with that right now myself, because I'm always talking about medicine and health and how my kid was sick. And she's listening right now to me record my 8-year-old. And for a while I realized like she's picking up on, is something wrong with me? What happened? And so just kind of keeping an open dialogue, not making it taboo, is so, so important to a family's mindset for healing.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, looking into that, I'm a big proponent of integral health, Ken Wilber's integral model, and just looking at the world from that perspective. And when we take into the health side of that and look at his cultural aspect, how our immediate culture, be that our family, our town, wherever we are, how they relate into illness is a massive component about how we feel about having illness, or how the progression of disease or healing takes place. So again, this is why I feel really happy to get to speak to you about this, because it's just all included in there. It's beautiful. Thank you.
And I found that, so I see my patients privately, and I also have group coaching that we meet once a week for a live part of the program, and we go through a program together, and I group families into like same age kids. And I really found that the families that go through group programs benefit so much from the community approach. Like it really, really warms my heart when like we all log in, and thankfully we have an ability to do that now and get together virtually from our homes and be able to connect with other people. And it really warms my heart to see how faces light up when we go through a journey together. And community is so, so important in one way or another to the healing process. And that could be just your own family as a community, but also looking for other families to work with or other people to work with on the same journey. That is sometimes the difference between being able to stick to a protocol versus not.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. It's beautiful. So there's just one last thing I'd like to touch on as well. So obviously where we are right now, December 2012, the world is experiencing an unprecedented event in the form of the coronavirus and what's been taking place. So for you, the kind of the program that you've put together, the protocol, how important is it in your kind of model of the world that we're doing these things as a way of actually helping ourselves to stay healthy in the face of something that's seen as being so kind of terrible for us?
So the name of my game is, if I'm exposed to that virus or any other virus or any bacteria, I don't want to be very sick. I want my body to be able to be resilient. I want my cells to be resilient. I want to have mild illness of any sort if I do get exposed, or maybe nothing at all. And I want the same for my patients, and I want the same thing for my family. And so personally, if you're wondering what I'm doing, all of like last fall I was like supplements because I didn't really know what to do. And I swear to you, I was actually meditating meditations that are dissolved to envision your white blood cells becoming powerful and killing off all the viruses, because I felt like that was really helping me stay focused, not panic. It was a very scary time for me personally, being a hospitalist in New York. Now what my main focus is actually sleep is my main. I mean, if you're asking like what I'm doing to make sure that I'm healthy this year, for my body is listening to my body, getting a ton of sleep. I feel like a new woman. Getting more sleep, even 1 extra hour a day is magic. And a lot of stocks and broths, so bone broths, stocks. Right now I'm doing a big deep dive into research on exactly why chicken soup heals, and why actually, what do we know about the science behind why these animal proteins and stocks and broths literally heal and seal the gut lining, and all that traditional wisdom, kind of bringing the science into it, and fermented foods. And I do take, when I'm feeling a little bit run down, I use herbs that really work well for me. And I make my own fire cider, which is amazing. And So, also kind of knowing what works for you, because something that might work for one person might not really work for another. But I think a good way to start is check out my favorite combo. If you're feeling a little bit run down, this has never failed me ever. And I can't promise it's the same for you, but it's really easy and then safe. So it doesn't really cost anything. You don't have to buy a supplement. It's blending ginger, fresh turmeric, fresh ginger, lemon, and local honey, real deal honey that you get locally from like your neighbor or somewhere. Blending it together, making it hot with like hot water and drinking it, and right away I could tell the difference. I use a lot of homeopathy for myself as well when I'm feeling a little bit off. So that's what I've been up to.
I mean, I love your recipe there as well. It's interesting because it's very similar. Many years ago, I was lucky enough to do some training with a master herbalist here in the UK, and she gave me her patented flu remedy, which was a sprig of fresh sage, a sprig of fresh rosemary, a cinnamon stick, some star anise, fresh ginger, fresh lemon. Brew them up together for about 15 minutes, let the temperature drop, add a massive wallop of local honey, stir it in, stick it in a flask, and drink it throughout the day. And honestly, it kills everything. It's great. It's super potent. So
yeah, and you can't make your honey too hot because it's alive, and you don't want to kill it with anything too hot.
Always let it cool down that little bit before the honey goes in. And I also really love the fact that you did your visualizations as well on your white blood cells, because part of what I do is I teach Qigong, which is a little bit like Tai Chi. It's a good mind-body exercise. But we have this old adage that the mind leads the Qi, which leads the blood. So where we're focusing and visualizing, that's creating that change in physiology. And part of the practice that we do when we're doing Qigong, it's building up our Wei Qi field, our external Qi field, which in traditional wisdom from Qigong is all about keeping away pathogenic energies from your body. So, that beautiful kind of idea that we're stimulating our white blood cells for that, and there's nice research now on Qigong and Tai Chi that they do have that immunosupportive effect. So, we encourage that a lot as well. That's perfect. Nelli, thank you so much for joining me today here on the Integral Health Podcast. It's been a real pleasure. We've killed an hour without really having to think about it, and I really appreciate that. So, is there anything else you'd like to say to our listeners before we finish the interview today?
Yeah. Well, I just stay positive and remember that your body has an ability to be healthy and wants to be healthy, and you just need to find the right combo of things that work for you. If you'd like to work with me, I have a practice in New York, soon expanding to New Jersey in the States. It's called Blossom Pediatrics, and if you'd like to find me there, it's blossompediatrics.com. And I also work with an internationally and nationally, so you don't have to be in New York to be in a program, and the program that I'm currently running is called Rescue Your Child's Health, and you could find more info on blossompediatrics.com.
Brilliant, thank you. And we're also going to be putting your Facebook page in, which is Dr. Gluzman, and your Instagram, which is Dr._Gluzman. And we're going to stick both of those and the website link and the protocol link all into the description for the podcast today. So if you want to check out any of that stuff, if you want to talk to Dr. Mom here, Dr. Gluzman, then you'll be able to do that through those links. So thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you today.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure. I don't know if you're listening or if you can see, but it's smiles ear to ear.
Same here too. So thank you, everybody. And we'll look forward to you joining in on the next Integral Health podcast in the future. And we'll be back in the new year with more interesting and fun topics for you to join in on. So thank you much for everybody for listening, and bye from me. And we'll
bye.
See you. Okay.